Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan. Today is episode 164, and today we're going to take a look at the Superfund sites in the state of Nevada. But before I do that, let me give a big shout out to my listeners because as usual, you guys are awesome. So a big shout out to New York, West Virginia, California, Indiana, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Texas, Oklahoma, New Jersey, Maryland, and Illinois. In terms of countries, the United States and the Russian Federation. A little bit of housekeeping here. So number one, do check out our YouTube channel. It is The Endurance of Labor Laws. We are trying to put everything on there as much as possible. So do check it out, like and subscribe to our lovely channel. In terms of things that are celebrated on November 11th, it is National Sundae Day, so basically ice cream. So do reward yourself and have some nice ice cream. And in the United States, it is also Veterans Day. So God bless our veterans. They definitely sacrificed a lot in their lives to protect our country. So needless to say, we're going to take a look at the state of Nevada. There are not very many. In fact, it is very few. So there are 3 of them listed. But it doesn't tell me that they are not on the list, but they kind of are, so it's kind of confusing. So Nevada has 3 Superfund sites. 2 of them, they are Superfund sites, but they're not on the national priorities list. They do have one that is a Superfund site and is also on the national priorities list. So good job, Nevada. You're doing a really awesome thing there. So the first one that is current and active is Carson River Mercury Site. It is located in 2 different counties, or actually 3. It is located in Lyon or Leon, I'm not sure how they pronounce that, Story County and Churchill. In terms of Leon or Lyon County, whichever way you want to pronounce that, the population there is 59,235. The next county that this Superfund site is located in is Story. The population there is 4,104. In Churchill County, let's see, the population there is 25,516. And the surface water, sediment, soil, fish, and wildlife are contaminated by mercury from a historical gold and silver mining operation. This one was added to the list in 1990. The next Superfund site, it is a Superfund site. It is current and active, but it is not on the national priorities list. So is it bad? Yes. But is it really bad? No. This one is called Anaconda Mine. It is located in Leon or Lyon, however you want to pronounce that county. It says the groundwater and surface water are contaminated by a wide range of heavy metals, radioisotopes, chlorides, sulfates, and acidic conditions. It says here they have contaminated dust from mine tailings. The next one and last one that is current and active, it is a Superfund site, but it is not extremely bad, so it is not on the national priorities list. It is called Rio Tinto Copper Mine. It is located in Elko County. The population there is 53,702. In this one, that area is contaminated with copper, iron, manganese, and zinc. Again, it is a Superfund site, but it is not considered as toxic and hazardous, at least not at a high level. So these last 2 are not on the national priorities list. So because it doesn't tell me that it's on that list, I don't know how long it has been a Superfund site. And so it's one of those things that, you know, we do have the national priorities list, which is definitely and should be a priority, but we have all these other Superfund sites that are still an issue, but just because they're not toxic and they're not hazardous, that doesn't mean that we should be ignoring them or not cleaning them up. So that's my concern with these, is that in the United States, we do have about 40,000 Superfund sites littered across the United States. We are predominantly focusing on the ones that are on the national priorities list. I will see if I can find the others that are just, I guess, just regular Superfund sites. I guess they're not as toxic, but here's the thing. For example, the Anaconda Mine, located in Leon County, their groundwater and their surface water is contaminated by heavy metals, radioisotopes, chlorides, sulfates, and anything that is kind of acidic. They don't give me a specific acid that is the issue. But here's the thing. Those are pretty serious things to contaminate your groundwater and your surface water. But here's the thing. The EPA, the federal agency, is in charge of setting the standard of what is considered livable or lethal. So needless to say, even though it is livable to be around those things that we just mentioned, do you really want to be exposed to that? Because over time, it could become lethal. See, that's probably one of my main issues with the EPA, among other things, is that they set these standards and they say, hey, we are the be-all, end-all, and these are the standards that we are setting as the bar. Basically, don't go over this, do not exceed it, but you can get right up to the lethal amount. Well, here's the thing. What is lethal, for an adult, would be extremely lethal for a child. So that's why you can't really just go off of, well, what's the range? What's the minimum that we can allow, without calling it a Superfund site that gets put on the national priorities list. See, that's the problem. We have quite a few Superfund sites that are on the national priorities list. And again, that's about, 1,200 to 1,400. So let's just round up and say there's 2,000. Well, if there are 2,000 Superfund sites that are extremely toxic and hazardous and are on the national priorities list, that means we still have 38,000 Superfund sites that are still toxic and hazardous, but they're not considered necessarily lethal. So no offense, Mr. EPA or Mrs. EPA, whoever's in charge, I think it's a man now, I don't want to be exposed to heavy metals, radioisotopes, chlorides, or sulfates. I don't want to be exposed to that. Even if it's not considered lethal, the human body is not supposed to be exposed to heavy metals like this. No, that was not in the design for mankind to be exposed to Superfund sites. And just because they're not extremely lethal, that doesn't mean they can't cause a problem later down the road. I've used this example in a previous podcast, so I'll close with this, because this is a short list. Let's say, for example, you have two smokers. One smokes a pack of cigarettes every day for like 40 years. And lo and behold, 40 years down the road, when they're like in their 60s or 70s, oh no, they have stage 3 or 4 lung cancer. Surprise, surprise, it's not a surprise. Okay, so then there's the other smoker. Let's say they smoked maybe a couple cigarettes a day, not even a whole pack, but they did that for a year because they were stressed and they were in school. But they stopped because they didn't want to smoke anymore, and it wasn't something that they really enjoyed. It was just there, and it was to help ease the stress of everyday living. Well, let's say they only smoked that much, which was very little, but let's say they also developed cancer like 30 or 40 years later. In fact, even someone that smokes a cigarette, maybe for a year or less, they could still develop cancer even as a young person. See, but here's the thing. There are researchers and scientists and people that work for the EPA and for different federal agencies, especially in regards to human health. They basically run statistics. And they say, well, what are the odds, basically, of you dying from XYZ, and what's the rate of that? See, just because the rate is low of getting lung cancer, just because you smoked for a year, that doesn't mean that no one ever gets lung cancer if they smoke, a few cigarettes every day for a year. It's kind of like, when we talked about, getting a physical. And right now, in the medical world, in the United States, and I think that this, came over from Europe about limiting healthcare, especially for women, but one of the, it's really sad, one of the things that they have been implementing and quite aggressively in the medical field in regards to women's health in terms of OBGYN and women getting a pap smear and a physical every year and then also getting mammograms and a breast exam, women are being discouraged from getting a pap smear because they said, well, the rate or the occurrence of cancer is really low. So we're just going to say get a pap smear every 5 to 6 years because what are the odds? Because basically they ran a study. They did statistical analysis And they said, well, the cancer rates have dropped, so we don't need to get a pap smear done every year. Here's the thing. The reason why cancer rates dropped was because women were getting access to health care. Getting a physical exam is basic health care, and to do that once a year is actually essential and very much necessary, because the reason why so many cancers dropped while they were doing a routine pelvic exam, or they were doing a pap smear, or they were just doing regular blood work, all the things that you're supposed to do at a regular yearly exam, they were able to catch the cancers early. And so if you catch a cancer early, your odds of surviving are greatly increased. So needless to say, if you catch cancer in stage 0 or stage 1, it's almost always a 99% rate of survival. But see, here's the thing, some idiot in a federal agency and in regards to these medical bureaus and these associations, they looked at it as, well, because the cancer rates have dropped and the rate of disease has dropped, why don't we just pull back the medical care? Why don't we just pull back the very thing that is actually diagnosing these diseases early and helping people to fight these diseases and also survive it? Meaning beat the disease. So needless to say, I meet more and more women that have gotten ovarian cancer and cervical cancer because they did not get a routine pap smear. They did not go in and get a physical every year. And they were discouraged from getting a physical every year. Getting a physical, getting an annual exam is basic health care. It actually does not cost a lot of money. And in fact, getting an annual exam is covered. It's covered in Medicare, Medicaid, and then it's also covered, say for example, you don't have private health insurance, or you don't have health insurance through your employer, or even if you're unemployed, and you think, well, I don't have health care. Actually, you do. You go to the county health department. So if you don't have a job, or if you do have a job and you don't have health insurance, your tax dollars are already paying for you to get a physical exam every year, regardless of whether you're a male or female. And a physical exam means a physical exam. Meaning a doctor, not a nurse practitioner, okay, but a doctor actually examines your body and does blood work. An annual exam for a woman includes getting a pelvic exam, getting a pap smear, and or getting an ultrasound done on their ovaries and their uterus. Also to get it's a mammogram. I think it's starting at the age of 40. You get a mammogram done every year. Also, you need to have blood work done every year. You need to check your cholesterol. You need to check your white blood cells. Like basically do a full blood count is what they call it. They look at everything. And especially for women, they also check the thyroid as well. There are so many things that can be caught early. But what is the solution of the elitist and or the federal government and some of these federal agencies? Oh, well, why spend that money there? The rates are dropping for cancer. Well, the reason why, again, the rates are dropping is because the disease was caught early. So why limit someone's access to health care? That makes no sense to me. And also, men need a physical. They need to get a prostate exam. They also need to get blood work done. Used to, men were the ones that were most commonly not getting their annual exam done. Because, of course, no one wants to get their prostate checked. I mean, who does? I mean, nobody enjoys this stuff. But it's for your physical health. It's for your well-being. Now, there are so many women that are like, well, I just don't want to get a pap smear because it's not pleasant. Well, duh, it's not pleasant. I mean, having blood drawn is not pleasant. Donating blood is not pleasant. I mean, it's not about it being pleasant or being unpleasant. It's about doing the right thing. Like, do you care about your body? And you're probably thinking, why is she bringing this up? Here's the thing. Sometimes federal agencies look at statistics specifically from universities, or they hire companies to say, hey, what's the minimum that we can actually provide people without it looking like we don't really care? Because that's basically what they're doing. That is essentially what the EPA is doing. So that's why we have 38,000, if not a little bit more, I'm just rounding up. That's why we have 38,000 Superfund sites that are still on the Superfund site list, and we still have about 1,200 to 1,400 on the national priorities list. So basically, the worst of the worst are not getting handled, but neither are the not so bad ones. That's why we have so many Superfund sites in the United States. It's because it's not being addressed. It's been identified what is an issue, but they're not getting cleaned up. And sometimes the common thinking about these sites is that, well, if they're really bad, it's just going to take longer. Here's the thing. Why not set up a timeline of what you expect to get done? Like, set some goals. Even if it seems impossible, set some goals. This is what we want to accomplish at 3 months, at 6 months, at 9 months, at 12 months. Like, set things up. At least try. With the EPA and some of these federal agencies, they don't even try and set a goal. They want the budget, they want the money. But they don't want to have to do the work. And that's why we have about 40,000 Superfund sites located in the United States. Just because the majority of them are not considered quote-unquote lethal, that doesn't mean they can't harm your body in the short term and the long term. And that doesn't mean that you won't die from being exposed to something. The human body has enough to deal with just being alive and being in nature, right? What's the point of making it worse, to be exposed to these toxic, hazardous chemicals and these heavy metals and these things that, there's only so much the liver and the kidneys can do. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. There's only so much the human body can break down and get it out of the system. What a lot of people don't realize, maybe even within the EPA, is that sometimes when you are exposed to certain substances, it never leaves your body. That is really scary. And what's even worse, a lot of the damage that these substances can do, the damage can be very much permanent, which means it's not always reversible. Think about a burn victim, like with third-degree burns. Will their skin ever look like, a newborn baby? Probably not. I would say the majority of them, they will never look the same. Well, if that's what you see on the outside, just imagine what's going on the inside of the body when it is exposed to these substances that the human body is not supposed to be exposed to, especially in the long term. That's why these things are concerning. I'm not saying be fearful. I'm not saying worry about, because being fearful and worrying, it doesn't do anything to help you. If anything, it hinders you. That's why knowledge is power. Like, we learn these things, I would say, to be aware and to overcome any kind of fear or worry, so that way we can handle these things quickly, safely, and appropriately. Because the worst thing we can do is be fearful or worry and then just stop in our tracks and think, oh, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? We already know what to do. Clean it up. Find the right people. Employ the right people. Because at this point, I got to say, we're not doing enough. And I'm not for raising taxes. I'm typically not for the federal government intervening in any way, shape, or form. But in this case, I think the federal government should intervene. And I think the private sector should also intervene, because this is a problem that affects everybody. It's not just one or the other. So technically that means that this is an equal responsibility to do what's right. I will go ahead and close this podcast or end this episode. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless and bye-bye.